Welcome to the Soul Star podcast with your spiritual besties, Allie and Mandy. We're here to make your spiritual journey fun, relatable, and inspiring. So let's raise your vibe and ignite your soul together.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another week of the Soul Star podcast. Thank you again for joining us. Every week we're just so honored to be here. Today we have another special guest. We're very excited to introduce you to Crystal Cassidy. She is the co-founder and CEO of SoulPod, which is a soulfulness awakening app that supports you on your spiritual journey. Welcome, Crystal, thank you for being here.
So excited to be here with you both, Allison and Mandy, and excited to dive into some really fun topics today.
Yeah, that was, I was fumbling over my words at the beginning. I didn't sleep much last night, so I'm sorry about the awkward introduction, but
Oh, no worries. We're here for it.
we're here.
Yeah.
Make
Great
laugh.
all of it.
Call ourselves out on all of it. But
Yeah.
do you want to introduce yourself a little bit further? Because I know you have quite an extensive background, and we'd love to hear a little bit about your background and kind of like what brought you to this path of spiritual awakening and sharing your story and starting your app and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm also excited to be here with fellow Canadians. So I love this. We didn't know that at the beginning, so this is very cool.
It is
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm the CEO and founder of SoulPod, which is a spiritual wellness app, or I like to call it a soulfulness app, beyond mindfulness, a little bit more into the woo-woo. And we take people through personalization, pair them in a powerful spiritual journey for where they're at in their lives right now, and also pair you into small pods of people who are on similar journeys. Because for me, at least on my spiritual journey, it can get kind of lonely and trying to figure out, and we'll talk more about that. The different experiences, the breakthroughs, the challenges. So we really want to support community on their spiritual awakening journey. But my background is more so in the sciences. So I studied biochemistry in school. I worked in pharmaceutical development, clinical research, got into cancer research, genomic diagnostics. Here in San Francisco, startup scene, like all very, very exciting and very intense as well. But the other side to me was the spiritual side. So I got exposed to meditation when I was 12. Didn't realize how lucky I was at the time to get exposed to it so young, but I did martial arts for about 15 years, and I was like 100% martial arts all the time, very intense. And meditation was a big part of that. But as I got older, I realized it's so much further beyond watching your breath, quieting the mind. You start to get into mystical experiences, which we'll talk about. And so I really wanted to, and one of my missions is to bridge the spiritual and the scientific, the right and the left brain. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
I love the bridging because we're seeing more and more of that because there is such a scientific part of it. I know,
Yeah.
man, like when we tried to explain what we do or energy, like Mandy came up with like a really good, because it really depends who your audience is, right? So some people need to have more of that science-based of it, and then others are open to the woo side of it. But I'm like being able to kind of like talk about it in a sense like, okay, we know energy is real. We know that this exists. Everything is energy. So then it's like, can you shift your brain over to the woo side and be like, okay, I could be open to that. So I love seeing this bridge between the two because it's so important. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, and it's such a cool time. Like the advancements that we're seeing both in quantum physics and classical physics and quantum computing. It's really molecular biochemistry. Like there's so much that's happening. It's really cool because the more we're discovering, there's a lot of synergies that maybe we thought weren't there. But it's also, I think, so important to balance that more logical, analytical side with the woo-woo, which is more embracing the unknown. And the deeper you get into your spiritual journey, the more you're dancing with that kind of void, if you will.
Yeah, the non-physical in that sense, right?
Non-physical. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really hard for humans, to grasp and to accept sometimes, like, if they're struggling with
Mm,
the, like, "Well, if I can't see it, feel it, taste whatever," it's like, does it exist? And it's like, I think
yeah.
that's where that bridging kind of, like, helps because people believe in science, and so it's like, how can we have them believe in this, like, things that you can't see, you just have to trust, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And things that reminding ourselves that the senses we do have as humans are very limited.
Yeah.
and and they are discovering that we have quantum states sustained in the brain, which this is just in the last year this has been
Wow.
discovered. So it's very exciting because if that's true, then what else is true as far as our interaction with fields and observation? And I'm probably diving off the deep end a little bit here, so
That's okay. We like it. We,
yeah.
I wonder, do you think, because we talk a lot about bridging the two different worlds or the two different sides of us or the science.
Mm,
And so, everybody talks about bridging that and that in some capacity, anybody who's doing this work or sharing their journeys or their experiences in a sense is participating in bridging that gap. Do you think
yeah,
we'll ever get to the point where there is no gap and it just overlays or is integrated into each other? Do you know what I mean?
I love that question. That's such a
Mhm.
good question. Do I think there will be a time when there is no gap? I do. I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Um, I think that it's closer than we think it is.
Mhm.
I was lucky enough in one of the classes that I teach in San Francisco, a Stanford quantum physicist came to my class, and it was so interesting talking with him. He grows quantum crystals in the lab,
Wow.
and I was asking him that question. From the spiritual perspective, it feels like it's getting closer and closer. I think there will always be an element of the unknown. I
Mhm.
think being in a human body, it's just impossible, I think,
Yeah.
on some level to really understand it all and to connect all of the dots. So there's always going to be this element of the unknown, of the curiosity of that expansion. But
Mhm.
he was telling me he thinks it'll be within the next decade that we understand the link between quantum physics, field kind of theory, and consciousness. It's becoming much, much more um, deeply appreciated in the scientific community. So we'll see. But I do think we're going to get so much closer than we have, which will help be more of a gateway for many people who need that hard evidence that this is not just meditation is not just a nice thing to do for yourself, and it's not going to just reduce your stress. It's a deeply powerful technology, inner technology.
Mm.
So I'm excited for that.
I love how you put that meditation is an inner technology. That's so true. It is like a blueprint or uh, an awakening that you feel deep within when when you connect to that technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a
AI is
doorway.
cool, but our own consciousness is cooler.
Yeah, that's very true.
I know.
Um, we wanted to talk with you about with all of the things that you do. There's a plethora of things that you offer and knowledge and wisdom that you hold, but we really were curious
Mm,
a bit about the Kundalini awakening. That's not something that we've really talked about on the podcast before, but
No.
do you want to share with us a little bit about what a Kundalini awakening is and like what does that feel like and how does somebody know if they're
mm.
going through one and how they can support themselves? We have a lot of
All
questions.
of the questions.
We'll get
I
to those one
know.
at a time.
Wait, how do we do it ourselves?
How do
All
we
of
do
the
it?
things. Let me have it. I want
Let me
it.
Oh, yeah, we can definitely spend some time on this.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so Kundalini, I like to think of the word is broken down, Kunda meaning coil. Lini, you can tell it kind of means line. And so I think of Kundalini as this ever present life force at the very base of your spine. And we often see this as a coiled up serpent. Again, the term coiled comes to mind. And I was thinking about this a couple years ago. It's so cool because in science, a coil is representative of potential energy. It's how we store energy.
Oh.
Oh,
And
wow.
so if you think of a coil, being released into a line, that energy is being released. And I think it's a similar concept, and we all have it. It's sitting there kind of waiting to be awakened. And I also think this is important to mention. The energy is always flowing, but when you awaken the Kundalini, it's like you've opened that gate further
Mm.
and it's more energy can flow. So it's not like it hasn't been flowing the whole time, but when you open um, that gate to or door, then it's like, ooh, it's like a rush.
Oh,
It's like you've unblocked the dam.
okay.
And that's typically the experience you hear about Kundalini awakening is this rush of energy experience.
Mm,
And I can understand how for many people it can be unnerving. There's some fear in the spiritual space, and I understand why around Kundalini awakening, because
okay.
once it happens, you're forever changed. You've been exposed to a new level of consciousness, a new level of your own energy, and more of your soul can come into this dimension. And so it's a lot. It can be a lot. But in my experience, each person's awakening is unique to them. So
Okay.
for me, mine was spontaneous in the context of I didn't know what it was when it happened to me. I had been meditating for quite a while,
Mhm.
and it was in a meditation in my apartment, and I had done some breathing exercises, and all of a sudden I felt this fire in my pelvis. It was this like not like a normal heat, like you feel that it's like an inner heat. And I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" And I could feel my nervous system turning on. So a lot of times we
Mm.
think of meditation as being very calming, but when you're having an awakening experience, that sympathetic side of the nervous system is turned on. My heart rate was increasing,
Oh, wow.
my breathing was getting deeper, and I was doing my best to surrender to it and allow it. And I could feel it move into my first center. And this is when I started to build a whole new relationship with my energy centers and
Mm,
realize
okay.
that they're very real. They're not esoteric. They're this bridge between the physical and non-physical, like we were talking about.
Mhm.
And for me, at least in my experience, it didn't go all the way up at once. It moved like my first center to my second center and hung out. And I was like, what is going on? And I eventually kind of came out of that experience. But for the next few hours, I could feel myself in everything. It was
Mm.
it was like this transition from believing that we're all connected and we all have this quantum field, wherever you want to call it, to knowing that we are. And so I think that's part of the Kundalini awakening too, is going from belief to knowing.
Mm.
And that was like presence unlike I had ever experienced before. And I had been meditating for a long time at that point. So that was the beginning for me. And it evolved over the years and it moved up into my power center, into my heart, and it kind of hangs out and moves around. And
Wow.
um, one thing I will also share that I think's kind of demystifying for me because I was so confused, I literally called up an ashram and it was like, "Can you explain, like, what I'm experiencing?" And one of the nuns, I'll never forget, she shared this with me, so I'll share it with you.
Yeah.
But she said, "Now you know why we do what we do,
Mhm.
and this is why." And I
Wow.
said, "It feels sexual at the beginning, so a lot of times we think Kundalini, we think feminine. We can talk about Tantra." And she explained this to me. She said, "It's not necessarily sexual energy.
Mhm.
It's it's waking up that first and second center. And with that increased energy flow, it's like bleeding out into the nerves around that energy center. And so it's
Mhm.
activating the feeling of that experience. And she was so right. As it moved into my solar plexus, I would get nauseous because it was bleeding out into those nerves.
Mm.
Um, so so yeah, it's just there's a physical experience, there's a mental experience, there's obviously a spiritual experience. Every time my Kundalini starts really moving, I can feel other beings coming into my
Mhm.
space, almost like a birthing process. They're helping. They're helping me kind of integrate. And you're also kind of tested at certain centers. Like when it got to my solar plexus, it was a question of will.
Mm.
Do you really want to awaken? Not everybody does.
Wow.
And you're kind of faced with those types of questions.
And you had already, in a sense, awakened to an extent, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. So there was, like, already, like, an awakened part, but this was just like, "Okay, now you've awakened this part, now we're gonna open up and awaken even more so," type of thing? Like, that's kind of yeah.
Yeah. I've learned that you're always awakening.
Yeah.
There's always another level.
There
And then when
is
you start
always
to
another
think,
level.
it's wild, right? Like
Mhm.
right when I think I'm like, oh, I've got it figured out, kind of. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's so much more. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess even during it, like, when you say, like, having to kind of, like, surrender into it because you could
Mm,
easily go into a panic, it kind of being because I
yeah.
know if, like, my heart starts racing and, I associate it with, like, a panic attack, so it's just interesting when you kinda describing it and you're like, "Okay, like, let's just observe it and not be like, 'What the heck is going on?'" Especially when it's so physical, right? And we can
Yeah.
definitely get kind of like, "What the heck is going on? What's wrong with me?" Type of thing, so that's super fascinating, thinking, like, if I was in meditation, I'm not sure how I'd react, to it, right?
Yeah. It takes some awareness and courage. I
Mhm,
think courage is a big part of it
mhm,
because to your point, that's not really what we're taught to expect. We don't hear that very often in mindfulness, training and circles about these moments. And I have them quite often now where your brain's probably going into gamma. It's highly coherent. And your
mhm.
heart is opening. It's not a calm experience. It's a pretty activated experience. And so, and what I did find, which just took me years to figure this out, is that if you judge the experience, you almost disconnect from it. So
Mhm.
even to the
Mm.
point to where, in my solar plexus, the nausea was coming. It was kind of throwing me off a little bit. As
Mhm.
soon as I had a judgment about the nausea being wrong or bad, it would kind of break me out of the experience. So I learned to relax judgment, surrender,
Mhm.
and it'll continue to evolve. It takes some practice.
Yeah. And I really like that, like, your story shares that it wasn't, immediate, like, zip up the chakras. It was because a lot of people, I think that's a huge misconception about a Kundalini awakening is that you have this intense energy that starts at your base and it just shoots up all your chakras and you're just, like,
Yeah.
overwhelmed and you're like, "What's going on?" And you don't know what to do, and it's just kinda like you kinda feel a little bit crazy, but your experience was so much different than what most people share. So
Mm,
it's nice to hear that different perspective, and also, I think for a lot of people out there they might realize that they also have had a Kundalini awakening, experiencing it in a similar way. Because as you're speaking and sharing your experience, I've definitely had similar experiences in meditation where the energy just kinda hangs out in different chakras or moves around and stuff, but I didn't associate it with a Kundalini awakening because um, I never really looked into an awakening or it wasn't something that was kinda in my path, that type of experience, other than just what you kinda hear as you're, living your daily life in this spiritual community.
yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people have had likely some form of that awakening, of that channel starting to open up. And
Mhm.
you can feel, right? In your experience, you can like, oh, there's increased energy moving through my system.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it's like a black or white thing. Like you
No.
either have this big experience and that's a Kundalini awakening, or there's this, it's all very nuanced. And I think the way that it shows up for people is going to be perfect for them. So if it does move, and I do know people that this has happened to, it's just like, ooh, it's all the way up. It's it's very overwhelming. And what I've found in speaking to them is that on some level, that was the best experience for them. They needed something
Mhm.
um, condensed and quick for whatever reason. So I really help people to trust your own process and that you're not going to be served something you're not ready for, at least on some level.
Mhm. Or, like, being supported during it or being alone, right? Like, in my head, I'm thinking, "Oh gosh, I think I would rather be in a space where I'm being supported." So, like, whether it's like a one-on-one breath session, um, for it to happen instead of just by myself, because then I might be like, "What?" So, yeah,
Yeah.
I like that you're kind of
Yeah.
like, you're gonna be given what you can handle. They're not just gonna be like, if it's going
Mhm.
to put you in a spiral, right? Yeah.
That's what I believe. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging.
Mhm.
I've had my own moments when I was doing Reiki Masters training, and I had a big activation to the point to where I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I can handle this." But on some level, I was prepared to see that beyond that veil at the time.
Yeah.
So, but it's also important to have your community and have somebody that you can, or a group, or check out SoulPod. And you can get support in those communities when you're going through this awakening. It's very helpful for integration because it can take a while to integrate. And the other thing I'll mention about Kundalini awakening, or any kind of awakening you want to call it, with that increased energy flow, increased harmonization of your consciousness, because you've seen beyond the veil in some way.
Mhm.
And this has been true for me whenever I have one of those big up levels, your life will realign externally. And so it's always so fascinating to me in the weeks or month or two that follow, is I'm like, oh, okay. This is moving out, this is coming in. So that can be the other part of the awakening that is a little discombobulating for people is, and I tell them just flow with the next 2 months. Take
Yeah.
your time because your world is realigning to your consciousness.
Yeah. So it feels like it can be crumbling when it's just like yeah.
Realigning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, do you think, like, is it undeniable? Like, I wonder, even like Mandy saying, like, oh, I wonder if I've kind of tapped into that. And in my head, I'm like, is it something that it's like you will know? Or
Mm.
could you have it and have no idea? Because you just, if it wasn't in your brain to know what that feels like or whatever. So I like, because I kind of feel like when people have Kundalini, they're like, oh my God, they know. But if you're not
Mhm.
really aware of it and how it feels, like, I just wonder if people can have it without realizing it.
I think that's probably possible.
Yeah.
Like, if I think back to that first kind of event, if I probably could have written it off as like a really wild meditation,
Yeah.
and not have gone more deeply into trying to understand what it was.
Yeah.
Um, and it would be really hard to move past the fact that you had that kind of piercing of the veil, if you will, or that high degree of presence. I think on some level, once you've experienced that, there's no going back.
Mm,
Whether you're consciously moving that needle forward yourself on your awakening journey or not, I think ends up being a choice. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Huh.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That. Do you do you think that people will have I think we kinda touched on this, but because you're talking about your Kundalini awakening, sharing your experience, how like it sat in your second chakra for a while and then eventually kind of like moved through the rest of them. So that happened over a period of time, right? No, it wasn't within one
Mhm.
meditation. It was over a period of time. So then do you think that some people or with a Kundalini awakening, it can take a period of time and also do people have more than one Kundalini awakening? Or is it once the
Yeah.
serpent has risen, it has risen?
Ooh, good question. Good question. I think it's a little both and.
Yeah.
Not to be really, vague, but I think once the serpent has risen, it's risen. I
Yeah.
think once you've opened that dam, there's no like putting the water back.
Right.
It's that channel has been opened. And so, and this is also what my teacher, one of my teachers shared with me. It's like there's no going back. You might not be super aware of it, but something has changed in your energy in this lifetime. And I think that it, at least in my experience, is continuously evolving. And it's like there's more of that channel you can open. It's not going to go back and close, but you can open up more and more of it. And as you do that, you expand more and more, and you really work through your fear of the unknown. Because an awakening, when you're entering that transcendent field, it is inherently unknown. It's not going to show up in a way that you expect. And so you start to be able to flow with that. And there may be certain times, all of a sudden, for no particular reason, something's aligning and you have another opportunity to allow even more energy to move. Like, even for me, last week was really potent. I was like moving some energy, accessing past lives. I was like, whoa. It was very, very potent. And then other times you're kind of plateauing, but not in a bad way, because you're kind of leveling out. You're like, okay, I had a big up level. My energy's been moving. I'm experiencing more and more through my consciousness and my energetics. And I'm just kind of like integrating that and
Mhm.
take that time. Like, it doesn't always have to be this like, straight up and out experience. Like, you can take those moments where I call it like the staircase of awakening, like up
Mm,
level, level out, integrate, up level out, integrate. Or you can think about the spiral. You're
mm,
kind of going around a certain level of consciousness for a while, and then you're moving up and up and up. So, so yeah, I don't know if that answers your
yeah.
question. That's how I think about it.
Well,
I like how you put it with the level out because that's how sometimes I'll see that in when I'm looking in paths, people's paths. I can be like, ooh, there's like a staircase happening and there's different levels and you're about to level up and then but there's more levels to come. So that's is
mhm,
what how it
Yeah.
feels at some point.
yeah. Well, because
Yeah.
and that's what I'm thinking, like, even just on our journey or my like, where Mandy and I have talked about in the past where it's kind of like going through a rough like a healing opportunity. So whether it's the dark night of the soul or, going through that period. So when you kind of say the integration, and then it's like I always feel a level up happens after I've gone through some of the darkness. And I'm like, oh, here comes a level up, and you can feel that. So it's interesting because I feel like I've experienced that this whole journey, of that kind of like, "Oh, here it comes." So I'm like, "This is," you have to go through some of the dark to get to the next level type of thing. So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So then it's just like, "Oh, wow." So it's but I don't know if I don't think I've had a Kundalini awakening. I don't know. But just like with, accessing your intuition, Mandy and I to our students say many times, it's not gonna be this grand, like, "Oh my god, my third eye opened," and like, I'm seeing everything and we're expecting this like craziness. It's like such a subtle energy that you're like, I've been doing
Mm,
this my whole life. I just had no idea. Right. So yeah,
yeah.
it's just very interesting that, the Kundalini, either the intense, crazy, going right through, undeniable, or more of a gradual kind of like up leveling happening. I like that one better.
I do too. I didn't know that's what I wanted, but apparently my spirit did. And
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned the dark. Um, the dark night of the soul, we like to call it. But my experience has been that those periods are so important because even even in meditation, if I am meditating for a long period of time, like an hour and a half or something, or a few hours, even in that like condensed experience, there's going to be parts of myself that come up from my subconscious. My body's going to fight me, my mind's going to fight me, even after meditating for this long. And And what I have learned is that when that challenge comes up and like my body wants to get up out of that cushion,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, no, 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 we're staying, we're here, we're in it. And
Yeah.
it's right on the other side of that darkness or challenge that usually is some sort of breakthrough. And so if you kind of expand that to your spiritual journey in general, when you're
Mhm.
going through that challenge or that darkness, I love to remember that there is something very sacred. The whole thing's sacred, but there is a breakthrough or an up level on the other side of that. And so
Yeah.
it kind of helps me keep going, both in my meditation practice and in life.
Yeah. Oh, it's true. Like, a lot of people
Yeah.
on this path, like, so many times, either students or clients that are doing readings where they're kind of like, "No, I did so much healing on this, like, tell me this, I'm, like, getting out of this. Like, I've already healed this, it's done." Like, and it's kind of like, "Um, no, just that level's done." And, like, it's never done in a sense.
It's
It's
never
never done.
done.
It's always,
It's
like,
never done.
moving, but maybe it doesn't feel as harsh because you've leveled up so you can handle it a bit more. And I always kind of look at it as like these waves that it's like, okay, well, you're not going to stay down here, or even reminding people that, okay, yes, maybe this past year was a big year of healing, but you weren't down here the whole time. You had
Mhm.
moments of coming up and it was like, oh yeah, yeah. And it's like that's, kind of like holding on to those moments. Like it's like it does feel okay at times. And then yes, it goes back down and
Yeah.
that's just kind of the journey. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And Mandy, it sounds like maybe you're saying you might have had a Kundalini awakening. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear
Well,
more.
I feel like if I was to go, I just didn't realize maybe if I was to go
Mhm.
into meditation and sit with that, with this knowledge and this awareness, I could probably receive some more guidance around it. But yeah, in meditation, I have some pretty intense experiences sometimes, and sometimes, and I just kind of like, I'm not really sure what that was, and I'll
Mm.
just carry on, and then it's just random. And, there's no rhyme or reason to it, but, I could say that I probably have experienced a bit of a Kundalini awakening, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's available to all of us.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you can also I also teach Kundalini yoga, one of my favorite modalities, Kriya yoga, meditation, but I also don't think you necessarily need those modalities to awaken the Kundalini. Um, I think it can come through any variety of ways when you're ready. But yoga and meditation certainly are, I think, an accelerant. They
Yeah.
can help refine your energy to allow that gate to open.
I was gonna ask about that with the Kundalini yoga. Um, how does that support a Kundalini awakening? I know obviously meditation supports it in the sense that you're
Mm,
kinda becoming aware of the energy, but I don't do yoga, and Allie doesn't either.
okay.
But but I've done yoga in the past, but never
Mhm.
Kundalini
Yeah.
yoga,
Yeah.
which is something that I'm interested in doing. I just haven't done it. So can you tell us a little bit about how that supports a Kundalini awakening?
Yeah. Where to start? So yeah, so Kundalini yoga and Kriya yoga are very like close sisters. And it goes back thousands of years. And at a very simplistic level, it's a combination of mantras, so chanting. When I teach, I don't focus as much on chanting. I focus a lot on breath work.
Mm.
And there's different breaths that you can combine with different postures to help energy flow. And of course, breath of fire is a very common one and it takes some time to learn it. But once you do, it is such an accelerant and it creates a lot of clarity in the physical and energetic system. Burns away, as you can imagine, anything that's kind of stagnant in your energy. And at least the way I teach it, I like to take people through a series and then a meditative moment. So I intersperse meditation throughout the entire Kriya or class, if you will.
Mhm.
And with that kind of specific sequence, you can really target. I tend to teach by energy centers. So I'll really focus on the first center, third center, third eye, but I spend a lot of time in the heart and below because if you can get those centers aligned and woken up a little bit, the upper spiritual centers will do their thing for the most part. But but yeah, it's a really powerful modality and everybody has their own kind of approach to it. But um, I found it to be extremely healing. I was also very sick in 2020 and had a near death experience. Um, and I would say Kriya, Kundalini, breathwork journeys were pivotal in me kind of rebuilding my cardiovascular and nervous system. So very powerful modalities, and with the right teacher and the right guide, can be really advantageous for your awakening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can somebody have a Kundalini awakening intentionally? So if somebody's listening to this episode and they're like, I want to have a Kundalini awakening, can they start forth on that path and start doing some of the Kundalini yoga and going into meditation
Mhm.
with the intention of experiencing a Kundalini awakening? Or is this kind of, would you consider, setting that intention and then just, as everything happens in divine timing, just sort of waiting for that time to come for you?
If it's meant to be type of thing?
Yeah, great question. Oh, you all have the best questions. This is so fun. They're really good. Um, yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'm very hesitant to say don't go in a certain way, because as long as, there's no damage being done, I think there's all kinds of different directions that you could go that would work. Um, I do think intention is a big part of it. So if somebody's like, I'm curious, like they have this deep curiosity about, they have a feeling within themselves
Mhm.
that there's something ready to awaken. I think you're naturally going to seek out those modalities. They're going to find you. And that's been my experience too, is the right practice, the right teacher, the right content is finding me at the right times. I mean, to the point to where it's a little like, okay, universe,
Yeah.
I think intention is a big part. So if somebody has that deep curiosity and they want to go for it, I do think that's going to feed their awakening. Um, a lot of times, like when I lead retreats, I can usually tell in the group, I'm like, that person's going to have the big breakthrough because I can kind of sense like who's there to really go for it and who's
Mhm.
like, I don't know if I'm ready for it yet." And that's also okay. Trust that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think intention goes a long way. There is, and you'll find this in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work as well, with the big breath that he teaches. His his amazing community, and I love his community. I love him. Um, it is a Kundalini awakening breath, and
Mhm.
what you're doing is Mula Bandha, and Mula Bandha is a root lock, and so basically you're exhaling all of the air out of your nose. You're contracting the pelvic floor, so the muscles of elimination, and as you do that with consciousness and awareness, you're inhaling through each energy center, locking down the muscles around the spine. And it's starting to create this cerebral spinal fluid movement up towards the brain, which we know scientifically is what's happening with that breath. And this is, I think, a very effective in Kundalini yogas and Kriya has known this for a long time. That is one way to overtly awaken the Kundalini. Because if
Mm.
you do that breath and you're locking down those centers and you're creating a field through that increased movement of proteins and salts, creates a field in in the spine that's moving into the brain. Usually that cerebral spinal fluid takes about 7 to 8 hours to circulate. Now you're doing it in about 30 minutes. So that is a very, if there were a breath that you could do to awaken, I'm pretty sure that's the one or one of them. And Kriya Yoga, will simplify it even more at the very beginning and just have you focus on contraction of all of your muscles and hold the breath at the top. And you're kind of doing the same thing. But I was certainly doing that, not really knowing it when I had my awakening. So
Mm.
I do think there's and you'll hear a little bit about Kundalini activation services, which I don't really do myself, but it's a similar process. If somebody really wants to do it and go for it, you can get into it. It just depends on how how you want to enter into it. But I do love the idea of just kind of trusting your own process. It'll come to you when you're ready.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
and
love
if we're
that
meant
too.
to. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's like I know, like, for myself, that's kind of how I've moved through it is, like, I know what's meant for me will come to me at exactly
Yeah.
the right time. So I just kind of trust in that and, and I guess, like, it'd be one of those things of even, like, not fearing it, I guess, in a way, right? Because
Yeah.
I definitely could be like, "Ooh, good." I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
that would
I'll be
be
the one in the class that's like, "Yeah, let's do this." And Elsie's like,
I'm like,
"I don't know."
I don't wanna do this." Let me dip my toe in. I've always been the one like, "I'm just gonna take it a bit slower." I know.
Which is just perfect
Mm,
too,
yeah.
because a lot of times when you're having that feeling of taking it slower, it's for a reason.
Mhm,
There's
mhm.
usually things that kind of want to fall into place. And so I've certainly been there at certain times when I've been faced with like, do you want to go for it today, Crystal? And I'm like, nope.
Not
We're just going
today.
to do a real chill breath because sometimes, oh, I'll share this story. It's,
Yeah.
it's, so I was doing a 4 or 5 hour meditation and, um, and what will happen at some point when you go that deep, if you want to call it that, is these things called portals will start to open up. It's really woo woo, but not like I think actually they are actual portals. I was going to say they aren't, but I think they are.
Yeah.
Um, and you can feel yourself being pulled or like accelerated through your third eye into this another level of consciousness. And I was so excited. I had been waiting for this portal to open up. One of the people I look up to the most, Carl Sagan, in like non-physical form showed up and I was like, "Yeah, Carl, let's go." And but then Crystal the human freaked out and she was like, "I'm not ready for that, for
Mhm.
whatever that was." And I passed on it. And when I came out of the meditation, I was so upset with myself because I was like, that would have been so cool. Why didn't I go for it?
Yeah.
But, my teacher tells me that those experiences open up and they'll continue to open up. So if you pass one by, it's not the end of the world. He's like, I've passed them by all the time. And I'm
Yeah.
this, 80-year-old third generation yogi. Like,
Yeah.
so it really gives you some peace as far as the process.
Yeah.
Um, the most advanced people you could imagine are on in its similar but different way encountering the same kind of experience.
The push and pull between the ego mind and, right,
Yeah.
the spiritual side of it, which definitely can be hard. And it's so funny because you talked about being pulled into the portal, and it just took me to a reading I just did on a client, and I was, connecting to spirit saying, what chakras need to be, read. And and I do this all the time, right? They just tell me which ones and then I start. But the crown chakra actually like hold me. There was no talking me like I didn't get my list. It was and in my head I'm trying to control it too in the sense where I'm like, no, 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 just wait, I'll go to you, but I want to know what else I'm doing. But there was no, it was like we're pulling you in, and I've never felt that where it was kind of not even control over it. It
Yeah.
was like it sucked me in so fast, and it was like, "No, we're doing this. I need to share with you these things." And it was, and it was all about opening up the higher chakras and the higher consciousness that this person was meant to do it. But when you say like that pulling, I was like, yeah, it felt like a
Mhm.
vortex. Like it felt like I was like, oh, I had no choice. We were going there, and until the message, came through. And so, yeah, it's really kind of fascinating, when you kind of talk about the portals, and obviously chakras are portals to different things, but I've never had it be so strong and visceral that it was like, yeah, you're not going anywhere else right now.
So cool when
Yeah.
when you experience that, like, oh, this is it's like an energetic momentum.
Hmm.
And there was another similar experience that it felt like a wave that was sweeping me up. And to your point, I didn't really have a choice, which I'm so curious about. In certain instances, it feels like I have a choice.
Yeah.
Other instances, I don't know if my subconscious mind has already said, "Yeah, let's go," but it
Hmm.
feels like that energy's coming for you,
Yeah.
and you're in for a ride.
We're doing this. Yeah.
We're doing this.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's
It's
so
crazy.
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I love
You
that.
have some pretty cool experiences when you're meditating.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's yeah, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating, which, Crystal, we should talk a little bit about your app
Yeah.
because, when you're going through these types of experiences, community is important, especially when you don't have somebody in your physical world that you can talk to about this. And I remember when I was going through my spiritual awakening, even before Allie and I connected, I would be like, when I just started meditating and I was having these like really weird vibrational experiences in meditation. And I was like, oh my God, to my husband, Nick, I felt like I was levitating and I was so excited. He's like, cool. And I'm like, he like took the sail out of my like the wind out of my sails. And
Totally.
I was so like, "Ugh, I need," like, it
Yeah.
was just disappointing. So it is
Yeah.
nice that you have built a community. Can you share a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So I built SoulPod with the intention to help more people move from fear to love. That's our mission.
Mm,
So can we liberate ourselves from how we manifest fear in our bodies, our minds, our spirits? How can we liberate that into the heart space? So that's really the intention behind SoulPod. And at least in my experience, a lot of the platforms out there are very mindfulness based, which is fantastic. It is an important foundation, but there isn't a lot of deeper explorative practices that are going to go longer. So typically our practices are not 5 minutes. They're like 15, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're taking you through breath work, contemplation, meditation, mantra, and self-guided experiences. And each practice builds on the one before it. So it's very much a journey. It's not kind of one-off practices. Although we're building more this year, I'm really excited about that will supplement all kinds of things.
Mhm.
But the community aspect, which we're also building a lot of new things around this year, is to your point, so important. I also have a husband who is very much not in the spiritual journey, but
Mhm.
um, he is curious enough that like we can have conversations about it. But it is hard, right? Because it does take the wind out of your sails when you're like, I had this mystical experience. I felt acceleration through my third eye.
Yeah.
Like, who am I going to talk to about that? And so the community in SoulPod is amazing, and they all have this deep curiosity, and they're all into the spiritual journey. And when you find people, we also have a new feature where you can build your own pod. So if you have family and friends,
Mhm.
people that are like your soul fam that you want to travel through a journey with, you can do that. But I think, especially going into these next few years, I think community is going to be really, really important. And finding people who are curious in the way that you're curious, that you can share some of these woo-woo mystical experiences with. I think it just warms my heart when we see that in SoulPod.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so profound, right? Like
Yeah.
it's and it really is like when you're talking to somebody who isn't there, even if they love you and are like, tell me, like, I'm totally, you feel that energy.
You feel it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you feel it. And it's like, even when you're speaking it, it's like if I was to speak it to, let's just even say my sister, who's not, is like totally open and like, yeah, Allie does this, but not into it. If I was to tell a story to her versus telling Mandy, it's like I would completely feel more comfortable and at ease, and I would tell all the nuances and everything versus somebody that's, yeah, totally open, not judging me, but I can feel that energy of like, they're like, I don't know what you're
You know, I
talking
get
about.
it.
That's weird. Yeah. Like even just a little bit, even though you're
Yeah.
like, they're not judging you, you feel it. You
Mm.
feel it.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
am that person that goes to like community gatherings and I'm like, who can I talk to about consciousness and awakening and like extraterrestrials and what's the connection between consciousness and like, but
It's like
I
you seek
rein it
out.
in. Yeah.
So true. And like there's this like reel, I think it was, yeah, Mandy and I, you and I did this reel where it was like, where you kind of feel people out where you're like, are you a bit or like, are you into this? And they're like, yeah, are you? Cause it's totally that way. Like if I hear
Yeah.
somebody say one little thing and then I'll be like, oh my God, they're open.
Well, you know what's funny though is I'll hear some people like refer or use some of the verbiage or whatever that we're used to, and then I'll be like, "Ooh, so excited to talk to them," and then I realize fairly quickly that they don't hold as much wisdom, and they're
Mm.
just, you know what I mean? They get it, but they're not like deep, you know.
And you're
So
like, too
Embodying
far,
it.
too
Yeah.
far.
yeah,
Too far, too far. Back it up, back it up. So many times.
There's that too. Yeah. Yeah. The embodied wisdom.
Yes.
Uh, and I think that's really what you're learning how to do is access, like you already have all of the answers within you. And it sounds so cliche, but it's really true. Like there is no teacher or guide. They can help point the way, but
Mhm.
once you learn how to access that state of being for yourself and can access your higher mind, I mean,
Mhm.
that's where you can draw that wisdom down into your physical experience. That's like how I think about embodiment.
Yeah, and that's what we teach in our 6-month container is how to start that practice of connecting and getting to know your spiritual guides, and then really working through, the energy of the chakras and sitting with the energy of the chakras and learning how to open your consciousness to receive messages and guidance for yourself, for others if you choose. But that is kind of like what the soul activating journey that we do. That's the point of it. That's yeah.
Yeah. And to understand, I guess, even like your energy, because it's like
Mhm.
until you can understand your baseline energy, until you can understand energy and how that feels in your body, it's like we don't have the conscious awareness of when we're feeling outside energies or how that shift happens or what happens within our body, because our body's obviously always intuitively telling us. But if we're not
Mhm.
consciously aware of it, it's like there's a disconnect,
Mhm. I
So
love
yeah.
that you both are serving in that way because I think that's so important. And to your point, Allison, that's kind of like step one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If I think a lot of people don't really know even how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Like, mm, like my husband, for example, love him. He's great. But
Love that guy.
love that guy. But we recently discovered that there are more than happy, angry, and another one I won't share. But like those, there's more than those states, and so, and it doesn't necessarily matter what words you put to it, but building that awareness of how it is that you feel in a moment to moment basis, that's a real skill. It's a very powerful place to develop.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
agree.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
kind of fascinating when you move through it too. Um,
Yeah.
I went on a healing journey this year by, I have a separation from my husband, all of that, and having that baseline of like, okay, I'm just gonna be curious about my emotions that come through and being very aware of it and how it feels. And I remember kind of coming to this conclusion about even just crying and how I was like, oh my gosh, it's a visceral, I can just feel, I just need the emotion to come up and out.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't even connected to a mental part. And we kind of associate crying or grief with like having a mental thing igniting it, I guess. And I just remember kind of experiencing and being like, okay, there's nothing mental that's igniting this, but I feel like I just want to bawl my eyes out. And it was literally about the energy just wanting to come out. And I realized it afterwards. But if I wasn't
Mm.
so in tune with my energy, and I guess emotions at the same time, I wouldn't have felt that in a different sense, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
so powerful.
Mhm.
You the other way that could have gone is to your point, not allowing that release. And then that emotion hangs out in your energy body, your physical body,
Yeah.
and it really wants to move. So that's such a powerful thing and gift that you
Yeah.
gave yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Emotions are really important.
Yeah, they
I
are.
cry in meditation and breath work all of the time. And sometimes, and to your point, you don't really know where it's coming from.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not coming from this lifetime, even. It's coming from
Mhm.
across space and time, and you're harmonizing that energy. So yeah,
It's
absolutely
fascinating.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Amazing.
I'm like, I want to have you back on. I'm like, there's
Yeah.
there's so many things. Like when you talked about tantra,
Oh, yeah.
Tantra, yeah.
Contra, yeah. I'm like, when you kind of, because obviously we can't get into that, but when you touched on it, I was like, I kind of want to know about that. Super
Anytime,
curious.
anytime.
Allison's on this journey of awakening her sexual prowess. Is that how you say it?
Ooh.
Your
Prowess,
goddess?
my goddess, my,
Oh, I
yeah,
love it.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
So that's where I
I'm
was like,
observing.
oh,
I'm
You're
observing. And then maybe I'll do
she
it
grabs the
later.
popcorn and she's
Yeah.
like, just share, just share, just share.
I love it.
No, I'm like,
Go,
yeah, so
Allison.
right. I know. So
Yeah.
I'm like that tantrum. I can't say it. How are you gonna
Tantra.
do it, Allison, if you can't say it? Tantra. I'm like, there's something about it that's pulled me that I've been curious about that, I can feel this kind of like, I need to explore this a bit more. So yeah.
Mm.
hmm Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
a great example of a modality calling for you or
Oh
finding you.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Where you don't even know anything about it, but you're like, this keeps pulling me
You
over.
feel, yeah, you're like, I have a curiosity there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that.
I'm
absolutely.
excited for you.
Yeah, yay.
You.
Thank you.
Well, Crystal, thank you so much for joining us today and
Oh,
sharing your story
thank you.
and, all about Kundalini Awakening and also about your app. And I love your app, and we will definitely share it in the show notes and on our platform and stuff because it sounds like a very supportive, beautiful way to support others as they go through this journey. And yeah, I love it. I can't wait to check it out myself. So
I know I've already downloaded it.
yay.
And it looks beautiful too, right?
Oh, thank
All about the
you. Thank
aesthetic.
you. Oh, yeah. We love aesthetic.
I love that.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And don't forget, if you're interested in joining us for our next soul activating journey cohort, we start in March. So you can check out all the details on our website. If, yeah, we'll be around if you have any questions. Bye.
Beautiful. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.